Hello, seekers and friends. Welcome back to another episode of Divine Journeys. We have Waxela Sananda back for part two of our interview. And where we left off, was Shayla, you were explaining to us about your journey as a galactic shaman and embodied ascension. But we left off just as we were going to be talking about really the shadow work and trauma work that is necessary for continued ascension. But first, remind our audience, what is a galactic shaman? What is it that you do?
Thank you, Bernie. Okay, so yeah, as a galactic shaman, I it's a type of shamanism where we are interacting with divine and consciousness in a really expanded way, and that includes earth energies and star energies and really everything that is everything is conscious. And so there's a lot of frequency work and medicine. Being a galactic shaman is well, I call myself that because I was trained by galactic beings ever since I was a very young child. I'd have visitations, and then I eventually learned to channel them without them having to visit me. It's much nicer that way sometimes. And then I was able to bring what I've learned through the years. I'm certainly not done, so it's ongoing, but bring together what I've learned into a training course, so I'm able to share that with other people. So a galactic shaman is a shaman who works with galactics. Essentially, it doesn't mean we don't work with the earth, but the focus is coming from those expanded galactic energies.
Well, Sheila, what you're touching on is really people having to step outside of what they've known. And the galactic that you refer to can be really probably higher source. Uh,
Absolutely.
and whether I know that they're, even if it's working just with your ancestors. So I also believe that as large as the universe is, and that we're just in one galaxy. After viewing the Hubble uh, satellite that took all these amazing pictures in the universe, and what came back was that the universe is so vast that galaxies were being born every second. So we have to understand that we could not be the only living beings in our vast universe. And so, as you're explaining about that, I want people to understand as they're listening to this is that it can really mean anything to an individual, what that galactic, the galactic visitors as you were talking about, or what that means for anyone who might not understand. Like you have a direct line to your higher self and higher source.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you presenced that, because as vast as the universe is, I'm sure you've heard this analogy before, but like if you take a drop out of the ocean, that drop is still the ocean. And the ocean is so vast that if it was just a drop, it'd be very difficult for it to imagine how big the ocean is. Nevertheless, it contains all of the properties of the ocean, and it is part of the ocean, and it is the ocean. So that's what we are. We are this embodied drop of the universe, which is consciousness. It's a conscious being. The universe, the multiverse, is a conscious being. And we are a piece of that, each one of us. All of the stars are in us. And so there is this whole idea of like it's all out there, but actually it's all in here. We can access anything from within. And it's kind of a change, a way to shift your mind in that to that way of thinking where we've mostly been, I think we've mostly been trained to think of ETs are out there, the planets are out there, whatever we're channeling comes from out there. But we are the consciousness that is out there. So it's really coming from the self. It's not about the body, but if we think of ourselves as, we aren't the body, but we also have this body. The body is also part of that. So we are consciousness, and it is all within us as consciousness, which is non-local, but we're focused in a body. So therefore, we can access all of that with this body. And that's pretty exciting.
Our body is wonderful, and as it serves. And you mentioned in the previous episode that this is kind of like being in an avatar, right? Because our soul is so much bigger and it's so expansive. And I think even with the spiritual ascension, the reason why it can be really uncomfortable for people is because, yeah, we're in this 3D body, and yet we're so much more than that. So trying to cram it into a little space can be really uncomfortable, right?
Yeah, yeah, it can. That reminds me when my daughter was born, I saw her, she had such a big spirit and she was so unhappy trying to be in that body. It was like she just didn't fit. She just was so uncomfortable as a baby. As soon as she could walk and run, she got way happier, but she pretty much screamed her entire infancy. She wanted to move and run, and she just couldn't fit what she was into that tiny body, and it was uncomfortable for her. And I think we're all like that to some degree. And the thing is, we are not these bodies. We just have these bodies, and they're our tool. And when you learn to do techniques such as, like there's remote viewing and there's shape shifting, which is really just putting your consciousness into another body or another place. And you can experience being more than this physically.
Uh,
So, and that
That's
can be
it's
stars and planets too. That can be all kinds of things.
that's gonna be mind blowing to a lot of people, so that to hear that. But we also have to really talk about how just this isn't just our only lifetime, right? So you'd mentioned also about past life regression and how people are exploring and learning about what are some of the things that we're bringing into this lifetime that are unresolved that had occurred in a past lifetime. And so we may not even have that trauma just from our childhood, so whatever might have been unresolved in a past life could very well be as far as like what's holding us back from being our truest self and living out our life purpose. So I wanted to come back into this episode and really talk about that shadow work and then the trauma release because, why is that so important in your work? Why is it so crucial for people to really understand, to look at themselves and they might not even be understanding what that trauma might be?
Yeah, and I'm going to say something not a lot of people probably say is I love shadow work. And that is a very wonderful shamanic tool as well. Shadow work and trauma work, you can they're hand in hand, right? They're partners. But shadow work is like, oh, I mentioned earlier about all of the densities, and that was in the first episode, but we might be born with, holding these densities from our own past lives, from our parents' experiences, also everything that happened while we were in the womb, but also everything that happened before that. And we will bring, I like to refer to them as codes, but you could also think of frequencies. We'll bring frequencies with us in our DNA that will have us have to, not have to, but get to experience things that are uncomfortable or blocks or difficulties or challenges that maybe our lineage has experienced before us, because we have an opportunity then to clear those things, not to torture us. They're not there to make us uncomfortable and unhappy. They're there to show us, oh, this is an opportunity to expand in consciousness while I'm in this body by running into a roadblock block and seeing that, okay, this is an opportunity for me to evolve, to clear this, to be present with it, and do what needs to be done, facing it, rather than running away from it. And eventually things keep showing up. If we do run away, not judging, but they do come back, right? They come back and find us. And eventually it's like, okay, sometimes people have to hit rock bottom to really be able to get up and say, yeah, I'm going to face this because I can't live with it anymore. But we don't have to wait till we get to rock bottom. If we can catch those things, those densities, and like become really sensitive and start to feel things, like if there's an uneasiness in an interaction and we feel it, and that person's someone important to you, you might have been raised in a family that just brushes it under the rug or yells and like doesn't ever really resolve anything. But a higher consciousness way to look at that is like, okay, I'm living with something that's a density that's playing out with this other person that's a reflection of myself. And this is my opportunity to sit down and be honest and talk about, what's going on and clear that field. And if you're with someone who's conscious, willing to do that, great. If you're not, you can do that with, you don't have to have the other person as a willing participant. That's just helpful if you do.
I think sometimes with these life situations that occur, I call them the seven dreadful Ds. So whether it's death, divorce, disease, debt, dependency, disaster, dysfunction, those things may come into our lives because, as you said, you don't necessarily have to have one of those dreadful Ds to be called to your higher self, right? But sometimes if we're ignoring it and we run into the same patterns, sometimes that cosmic two by four comes and hits us with something devastating for us to
Yeah.
wake up to that. So, can
Yes.
you guide us through, like, what would you do to incorporate some of your work with someone who is in that space?
Okay, yeah. Well, first of all, non-judgment. It's, these things happen and then people will start to judge ourselves because that's just what we do. Like, why me? Am I a bad person? Am I, like we just start to think about, okay, this is my fault. But rather than having it be your fault, it's just what showed up and it doesn't make you good or bad. So to approach with non-judgment and curiosity. These I find are the two most important mental traits that you can approach anything with. So, okay, it's not like I'm being punished by the universe. This happened. I'm not going to judge it. It is what it is. How do I go forward? And then get curious about it. And and I also, a lot of people will say, well, I thought I was done with that thing and now it's up again in my life. Why does this keep happening? And one way to think of it is you're always moving up a spiral staircase. Now you're coming around, let's say the light side is over here and the dark side's over here. So you're coming around to the light, everything's great. You've cleared all your stuff, you're shining, and then you move up. You have an ascension of frequency, right? You ascend that case and you're coming up the dark side now. And guess what? Everything kind of goes dark, right? Everything gets difficult again. But here's the thing, it's because when we ascend, and this is physically and consciously, we are clearing like the densities that have been there must be cleansed and cleared before we get to come around to that light side again at a higher level. So it's a gift when you look at it this way, like, oh wow, I have leveled up and I've been pulling these, all this baggage along with me, but now I've leveled up and the level that I'm at now doesn't allow for this much baggage. So I got to drop something before I can get to my next level. And so it's this opportunity to lighten your load and let go of some of those traumas and densities and challenges. And then what happens is, yeah, then things got like really bright for a while. You adapt to that, you adjust. And if you keep doing the work and keep going, yep, it's going to happen again because you're going to level up again. And then you're going to get hit again with whatever density you still have. And you can start to see that as, oh, wow, this is really a gift, an opportunity for me to again lighten. And when you keep doing that for yourself, you keep doing that for your lineage, you're doing that for your family, you're doing that for all of your lifetimes, then you start to like expand and be able to do that for humanity, expand and do that for the earth, expand and do that for your galactic lineage, for your universal lineage, and for the universal conscious being itself. And that's like a super high level of of that type of shadow work that we actually get to do when we're willing.
I think that's the key word is willingness, right? So there are going to be some who, when they're, especially if they're just in it recently, as far as dealing with very toxic environments or toxic people. And so, how do you start with someone? Because I know that many may think, hey, I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for a natural disaster to take my home. I didn't ask to be married to somebody who was an addict. And, or, like I didn't ask to be born into this family to be abused. So, as somebody who's really processing what you're saying, like, wait a second, though, I didn't ask for this. So how does one realize that some of this is part of like the consciousness awareness, but the empowerment, right? From
Yeah.
coming of a perspective of a victim of some whatever the circumstances to becoming the empowered victor. So
Mhm.
how do you help people through that shift? So that
Yeah.
mindset shift
Yeah.
is so critical.
Right. And there are people that are going to be really resistant to that. And that's okay. That's just where, if you that's where you are, that's where you are. It's an opportunity and an invitation to explore this. So yeah, if you're experiencing kind of that victimization, you're saying, but I didn't ask for this and this is what I got. Well, the difficult news is that you did ask for it. You just aren't conscious of having asked for it. And I know that's this can be very triggering for people if they're like, but what about babies and children that are in abusive families? I know that, that's really difficult to look at in any kind of logical way, but they are not babies and children only. They are universal consciousness, their source in a new body. And for whatever reason that we probably don't know, they chose to have an experience of that, to overcome it, or to grow from it in some way, or to clear it for their lineage, or, whatever the reasons might be, some aspect of their divine knowingness chose that for their path. And in the higher, this is a very dense realm. In the higher densities, we don't have stuff like that. That's not what we don't have an opportunity to come into a body and experience physical things that are very negative. Using my words carefully there, so you don't get, a check. But so it does, it does take coming out of a regular type of, we're trained to be victims, to be honest. We're trained to think poor me, or to empathize with a friend and like, oh, poor you, I'm so sorry that happened to you, and then, but we're actually holding ourselves and others small when we're only looking at it from that perspective of poor you, because really there isn't any poor you. It's, you have this opportunity now. What are you going to do with it? How are you going to be with it? And I'm not saying you don't need to grieve or feel. Like, part of it is really allowing ourselves to go through the grieving process, to feel what you're feeling, to, if it's anger, if it's rage, if it's, whatever it is, to let yourself have that human experience of feeling the feelings and going through all of it and getting it out and getting through it and moving through it. And then the willingness to, okay, once I'm at that point, now I'm willing to step into a higher perspective. So if you just lost someone or just went through someone horrible and you're in that very difficult, raw place, that's okay. Let yourself be there. Let yourself be there until you've felt it all. And I think that's a key. A lot of people will do everything they can come up with to not feel it. That's where addiction comes in. That's where avoidance and, all of the things that people do to avoid feeling the repercussions and the things that are going on in them, in their physical body. And once you become, like I say, I teach people to have a different relationship with your pain. Your pain is information. That's what it is. It is information to guide you. And when we numb it or distract ourselves from it, or, whatever, all the different things that we do and avoid it, we are missing that opportunity to receive that information and move that pain and or change that pain or shift that pain, heal that pain in some cases, and evolve. But pain really is giving us an opportunity to evolve when we're willing to be with it.
And wow, all of that is so amazing because I think most of us, we're brought up to have this belief system, right? We're immediate. It's the, when you hear about victim, especially in the legal arena, it's like, well, you have to be a victim in order to be seen as a viable client, right? So the victim of a circumstance in order for it to be seen as a legal opportunity. Just an example, but also I feel that what you were talking about through the generations, that we have an opportunity to do it different because one of the lines I've ever heard in a movie that just was profound, and I think it was from Hell or High Water, and there was a quote about how poverty is a disease, and I never thought of that way, but it's part of what the lineage that we come from, right, from our ancestors. But we have the power to make that shift so that we can create a new legacy for the family that we bring in. And so, with that said, as far as how to have really the audience understand that we are greater than our own life, there is so much more out there for us, and we're limiting ourselves being in a place of victimhood because that is what brings dis-ease, right, to the body. What we think about, we bring about, and then as a victim, it's going to show as, oh, we're continuing to be a victim with some kind of dis-ease because that's what we got comfortable with. So then, Washayla, how do you take this consciousness of like really bringing it to the light? There's so much more of that that can be brought to somebody's awareness, right? Once they're there, the consciousness, once you go up that ladder of consciousness, how much faster life can happen for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's not a snap of the fingers and it's done. It really is going through the step-by-step journey of mindset, like I said, is such a huge part of it to start to reframe your mind. Like for instance, with the poverty, it's with light workers, with healers, with star seeds, there is a poverty program and or at least a lack program that I see so many fall into. And it's this whole concept of, oh, I can't take money for my spiritual work or whatever. And then sometimes people that do take money manipulate and abuse and misuse, so it's kind of perpetuated by that. But it's about the willingness to change the relationship, with that and upgrade your mindset. As you're doing that, you're letting go of the densities and the lacks and the blocks and all the stuff. And then you start to feel less dense. And that really is ascension itself. Ascension means moving up. You're moving up in frequency. And as you do that, you're letting go of these densities. Life does start to feel better and it starts to be more in flow and things start to be easier and more graceful and smoother. And for me, like one of the things I've done when I've gotten into a situation where suddenly the source of my income or what I thought was the source of my income has unexpectedly gone away, that I'm like, but that is not my source. That was never my source. That was an avenue that my source used to feed me, to give me abundance. But that was not my source. Or that person, if you went through a divorce or something, that person is not your source. That job is not your source. Your source is so much bigger than that. Your source is divine. And don't limit your source to being another person or a job or some other situation or even an inheritance or anything like that. It's the divine. So how can you get creative and get co-creative and start to bring in like the energy of what you do want? You start to focus on what you do want, and then You can use, the techniques of mind and visualization and feeling and action to create your life as what you want it to be. And that doesn't mean things won't show up along the way. They will. But when you've done enough of that preliminary work, trauma work, clearing, shadow work, it's like a curtain kind of opens up. And then you can see, like, oh, this is how it actually works. And then it's a lot more fun. And then if you keep doing that, things just keep getting, you keep having access to more and more and more. And that's what makes it really, really fun. So it gets to be a lot of fun when you do this work.
Wow. Well, Shayla, I just am in awe of what your work is and what you're contributing to amazing work towards for people to actually do their healing and to get to that point of transformation in their lives. So, what message or advice would you like to share, just as like kind of like a final thought, as people are on their journey of spiritual ascension?
Yeah, great. So I think, I mentioned earlier a couple of key things, and curiosity, like always approach with curiosity, and then tenacity. Keep doing the work. Just keep going for it. And when you get like confronted with something you thought you had already cleared, think of it as an opportunity. It's just be tenacious. Keep doing it. Keep going. When you find yourself, stopped, take that, the last thing in the manifestation process is aligned or inspired action. So if you let yourself get stopped, you're going to kind of stall out, right? So just keep moving forward, keep looking at what's in front of you and being present with it and addressing it and then loving it. And that allows you to move forward into the next version of your life.
Oh, beautiful. Well, Shayla, thank you so much for being a guest on Divine Journeys.
My
So
pleasure. Thank
I'm
you,
sure
Bernie.
I know that people are going to want to get in touch with you. So how can our audience connect with you, to work with you, and learn more about your offerings?
Yeah, well, the best way is my website. It's my name, washaylasananda.com. I have a couple of free gifts on there. So if someone shows up, they can do a free download and then you'll get on my email list. And then you get my YouTube videos and my podcast. That's all available there. I have a 6-month embodied ascension course. If that's too much for a lot of people to take on right away, I also have like a foundations class that goes through all of the foundations of embodied ascension at a much lower price. So it's a great way to start. And you can also just reach out, message me through my website, and we can have a conversation if someone is really interested in this and wants to learn more.
Well, Shayla, we're also going to include the links so that people can have access to your website and be able to connect with you that way. But I just want to thank you so much for your warmth and your bright light and bringing this to Divine Journeys.
Thank you, Bernie, and thank you for doing this and bringing together amazing people. And it's just wonderful to be with you and get to share some time and space with you too. I appreciate it.
Oh, I'm giving you a big virtual hug.
Same.
Oh, seekers and friends, thank you so much for joining us on Divine Journeys. And do come back. Make sure to subscribe so that you're notified when new episodes drop. And if you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to like and share. Thanks for joining us. And until next time, namaste. Spread the love and be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and share the channel with fellow journeyers. The positive vibes will come back to you in abundance. And be sure to join the Divine Journeys community Facebook group to connect with like-minded seekers. Namaste, my friends.